morning, evening, whatever it is to you all. Um, the reason I'm doing this video is because I know the other night at our District and I Methodist Men meeting, I talked briefly about the No Man Left Behind series. Well, this is the one book that we're reading, and it's put out by Patrick Morley and Mr. David Delk. We're reading it. Mark Stallions, our president, Jim Axon, our district president, and Steve Bays, our Conference United Methodist Men Scouting Master, is reading the book with us. And Byron Brew is supposed to be joining us, and we started this along with the other series of the No Man Left Behind, which I got the book underneath here, so I can't bring it up right yet. But I'm going to go ahead and read the first chapter to y'all, because I think if y'all read this, you might get interested in building up your men's group. The first chapter in this book is called Men's Ministry is a Rocket Scientist. Pat has a favorite business saying he picked up somewhere along the way. Anyone can bring me a problem. I'm looking for people who can also bring me a solution. This chapter provides an overview of a proven system to help you disciple every man in your church. The rest of this book will unpack this system in detail. During a high-tech boom, young professionals in Orlando, Florida were creating a dream company with backgrounds in helping the homeless, the jobless, the disadvantaged, the sick, and they created a unique computerized system to track cases they passed through the social services community. As the word got out about the new technology, inquiries poured in from all over the country. Soon they had a for-profit company, investors, consultants, and they were going to do good in the world. In the process, they hope to do well for themselves also. Yeah, we all like that when we first start out a new business or a new business venture. We hope to prosper, but we expect it to happen too quick. The American Dream. Brett was one of those dreamers in the company's first year. They did their first $1 million in sales. It was hard work. One person was responsible for selling software, which was Brett, and he would go anywhere, anytime to talk to anybody. Brett attended countless conferences and made dozens of sales and presentations. He was living the American dream, being in on the ground floor of technology company. Soon the venture capitalists started calling. They told Brett and his team how they should grow. They said if certain benchmarks were hit, they would be ready to meet. Brett and his team began to believe they would hit it big. Following the venture capitalist advice, Brett hired a national sales force. Soon 6 people scattered across the country were looking for potential customers. But those salespeople were new to both social services and technology, so after they found the prospect, Brett flew out to make the presentations. Instead of one person scheduling trips for him, Brett now had 6 people scheduling each trip. So yeah, he was getting busy. And don't that sound like to you when you start something new, you get excited, and you put all your energy, you put all your effort into it, and you begin to neglect other things? That's what I see happening here, and this is what's happening here. And this is where the bubble busts. Then the stock market started to go south. Suddenly, the venture capitalists who had been breathlessly waiting for the company to grow stopped returning phone calls. Even as Brett and his team met potential investors' benchmarks. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Brett had heard this all his life. So he worked even harder, and even without the capital from those investors, he was determined to make the company a success through sheer will. So one afternoon, Brett got an excited call from his representative in Texas. He asked Brett to come the next day to meet with a large government prospect. A little worried, Brett called his wife, Kimberly, to break the news. He told her he had to go on another trip on another short notice. Kimberly's response caught him off guard. "That's okay," she said. "It's easier when you're not here." I mean, we all heard that before. Haven't you all heard that before when somebody in your family has said that? Brett tried to laugh it off. "Easier when I'm not there? Huh!" And he and his wife had two small children. They were active in their church and owned a home. What was she talking about? So when Brett got home, he asked, "It's easier when you're not here," she repeated. "You're trying to build a company. I understand. But it's not easy for me either. You call at 5:30, say you're finishing up, and you'll be home in 30 minutes. Then you walk in the door at 8 o'clock at night. I try to keep the dinner warm, but it's ruined. I'm the one who has to answer the kids when they ask, 'Where's Daddy?' Or 'Why is Daddy always so grumpy?' When you are here, you're tired and that you pretty much ignore us. So go on your trip. We will be fine, really. It's just easier when you're not here." Brett was in trouble. Worst of all, he really didn't know how it happened. He told himself he was doing it all for his family and that he would buy a nice house in a good neighborhood for his wife, send his kids to good schools, give money to charity. But somewhere along the line, he had lost his way. He realized it really wasn't about his family, it was about Brett. Ironically, he was losing himself in the company, and he and his wife were busy at church, where they led worship for several hundred grade school children in multiple services every weekend. How did that happen? Brett grew up in the church. Now he was a leader in his present church, and yet his wife and family preferred for him to be gone. It was easier. He had become a distraction in their life. Why was Brett being left behind? Why hadn't he connected with the church in a way that helped him become a passionate disciple of Jesus Christ? You know, that happens a lot. We all get involved and we forget that each other do need to be spiritually fed. You know, it's just like our pastors. You know, I think of our pastors all the time. Our pastors become like this. They get burnt out and they start giving up because they're always doing this, doing that, running, you know, and they don't get time with their families, even their wives. You know, I know, you know, a lot of pastors get divorced and stuff, and the wives leaving them because they're not there to spend time with them and their families. And the ones that do stay, I admire the pastors and the wives that stay together throughout all this, and the wife and them are supportive of the pastor and stuff. You know, even pastors really need to be fed. We, as men, as as laity, we need to be feeding our pastors just as well and building them up and helping them just as well. And to continue on, the paradox of men's ministry, it is a rocket scientist. Men's ministry, how hard can that really be? Yeah, we think, oh, it's not going to be that. Oh, yeah, we can get them come in, we can get them do this, they're in church. And that. But what are we really doing to reach out to them? Are we really hitting the spots that they need? Are we really doing the things they like and getting that relationship going? And not just doing a Bible study every week. I mean, if you listen to Pat Morley in his Men Reaching Men, how one cup of coffee can change the world. It's amazing what little conversation you do. You can do it with some type of ministry, you know, like a fishing trip or a building expose or go work on a car or whatever with some of the men. Do something they like. You know, you might find out that they have some of the same common interests and they just need someone to talk to, and you build that relationship that way. So just think about it. Think about, you know, you've got men, you've got a church, add a testimony. You know, pancakes is always good. We know First United Methodist in Frankfurt, they love pancake breakfasts. So, you know, they like to have that, and, you know, add a prayer, and poof, you got a man's ministry, right? You know, you could sit there and just have a barbecue. You could sit there and have them come over and play cornhole and do all that. And there you go. You got men's ministry. And ministry, you know, not even just for men. A women's ministry could be the quilting, but, you know, even then you can get men in the quilting. You can get men and women together doing stuff, but we're mainly focused on men's ministry, so we gotta think of what do men like to do. There are some men that like to cook, and some men that like to teach cooking. And could teach some of us how to cook and be better cooks and stuff. I think for those of you married, your wife would love it if she come home and you would cook a nice meal for her. Man in the Mirror has worked with thousands of churches across America to help them disciple men. Leaders from churches all over the world have journeyed to Orlando to attend classes at our Leadership Training Center. This book is based on what we have learned from these and other churches. You get to stand on their shoulder to encourage and motivate these leaders. We used to tell them, look, what we're trying to do here is not rocket scientists, and it really isn't. And then during one class, a new insight. As we stared at this group of leaders struggling to reach men in the church, we realized these were not clueless men. Many were successful businessmen and leaders in their churches. They were accomplished, intelligent, hardworking men, and yet year after year they were struggling to reach and disciple their men. Why? Because men's ministry is just grueling. As one of our leaders said, a man is a hard thing to reach. Yeah, because us men can be stubborn. Us men be like, well, we don't need this. We all spiritual. We know all we gotta do is come to church and that's it. And then, we kind of tend to hold our emotions in because sometimes society expects us to be this strong brute man that holds everything in and doesn't get it out. And then eventually, we get tied up with our frustrations, trying to find hobbies, trying to stuff to relieve stress instead of just sitting down and having that good old cup of coffee with somebody, or having a game of cornhole, whatever, go fishing, just you and a couple of the men get together and just talk and just get things out. And again, they quote in here that men's ministry is actually rocket scientists. While the process is simple, enough men themselves are quite complex. So yeah, because we like to bottle stuff up, we don't like to say much, and and society kind of tends to make us have to be the rough and tough and all strong and can't be weak and all this. But we all are human beings, just like women and children. We're just as human as they are. When you work on rockets, things are pretty objective. It's all about physical laws and mathematical concepts like gravity, not gravy. You see what's on my mind? Food's on my mind. Gravity, velocity, and angles of ascent, and coefficients of the drag. But men are not nearly as predictable. Rockets don't get laid off, have trouble with their kids, and endure health crisis. But still, there are some parallels between rocket scientists and men's ministry. For example, here we go, back to gravity. Most men shoulder the burden of supporting their family financially, trying to be a good husband and father, resisting temptations of the world that wants to drag them down. Like I said, we try to hold everything and we try to be strong and not show that we have problems just like everybody else. Especially when you're going to church now and then, nobody in church, you don't have all these activities. I can see some churches like down the street, Junction City Baptist, they really got a phenomenal service and phenomenal relationship going, different groups. They went from one service many years ago, back in 13, and they're up to 3 services now. So, they're doing good. I need to go over there and see what they're doing that maybe could help us. And then velocity. New Christians go like gangbusters. But many men have been in church for a long time, and their enthusiasm is waning. Well, you know what? Yeah, they're not enthusiastic. They just come, they do the same thing over and over, and that's it. Come to church, come to Sunday school. Yeah, I'm going home, and that's all they do. You got some men that get enthused and get into it, and then they do good, but some that just don't anymore. Angles of ascent. Some men get it and steadily move forward. Others careen back and forth in their spiritual journey, veering off and hurting people as they go. The key is to ensure they are moving toward Christ-likeness. Coefficients of drag. Jobs, soccer games, family problems, church commitments, and hobbies. All of these seem to hold men back, leaders too, as they seek to develop their faith and their ministry. If you have been struggling to get the traction in your men's ministry, this should bring relief and hope. It brings relief when you understand it's just not you. It's really hard to reach and disciple men, and hope, because this book contains a strategy that can help you do it. You can reach men in your church. You can get them to grow closer to Christ. This book will show you how. We're going to talk a little bit about the physics of men's ministry. You must accept several contrasts. However, if you are going to launch and sustain a powerful men's ministry, these will come up again later, but it's good to manage your expectation from the start. Here are 3 realistic parameters to remember. First, it takes a long time to make a disciple. Jesus spent 3 years with his disciples, traveling with them, eating with them, teaching them. Even then, one of them sold him out. Surprisingly, he picked some of these disciples that I was like, I probably would never pick, and another denied him. He even knew him, and all of them panicked and hid after Jesus was killed. How can we expect to make disciples in a 24-week class? The corollary to this is, second, it can take up to 10 years to build and sustain a successful men's ministry. That's right, 10 years. As Richard Foster said, our tendency is to overestimate what we can accomplish in 1 year, but underestimate what we can do in 10 years. There is just no such thing as an overnight men's ministry success story. If you stick with it, eventually you will look around your church and see men who are disciples and leaders. You realize that your ministry is responsible in some way for most of those men. And it will take 10 years. You are not called to produce immediate results, but we are just called to be fruitful. We are just called to be fruitful. All we gotta do is be fruitful. Even, we don't have to get a whole lot of people. Even if we get 1 or 2 and we're doing the best we can, we are being fruitful. It's just like I was listening to Rhoda Raglan the other day on her Facebook page, and she got me excited because she's like, what are you doing with your hands? What are we doing with our hands? How are we being fruitful? I thought about that, and I thought about this book, and yes, Rhoda, if you happen to listen to this, you or Robert, I have to share it. That is right. We are to be fruitful. What are we doing with our hands? We have been blessed by God with these hands to do his work, to do his will, to be fruitful. And this is what we should be doing, using our hands. Third, there are no 5 easy steps to an effective ministry. There aren't even 5 hard steps. At the Leadership Training Center, we sometimes refer to this as an insert tab A into slot B men's ministry, and it just doesn't work that way. This book is perceptive, not prescriptive. We explain why and how to disciple men, but we don't specifically exactly what you should do. Instead, we will help you plan your own concrete next steps according to the culture and the needs of your church. Now we're going to talk about going from the prototype to the manufacturing. This is a very interesting story. I like it, and it really makes a lot of sense about what we do a lot in the churches today, and how sometimes we never make it out of the prototype steps. We don't go out on that limb and try some of this. We do all these prototypes, and we just sit there and don't do nothing about it. The hard-cold reality is what we will not see is what we will not see a revival in America, and would, if effective, this disciple building of men in churches does not move from the prototype stage to the manufacturing stage. And what do we mean by that? Imagine if you were alive in 1900, you might have seen an automobile drive through town. People would have gathered to the point and stare at this unusual new apparatus. But only 25 years later, to see an automobile would have been no big deal. Why? Because in 1913, Henry Ford invented the assembly line with a conveyor belt. By 1927, the Ford Motor Company had manufactured 15 million Model Ts. Wow, that's a lot. Ford helped to move this auto industry from prototype stage to the manufacturing stage. He went out on the limb because he knew he had a good thing and he tried it and it worked. So right now, hundreds of churches are doing a wonderful job discipling men. You may have heard about some of them, and all we can do is point and stare and learn from their successes. But there are over about 350,000 churches in America. Our passion is to see a dynamic disciple-making ministry to men in hundreds of thousands of churches. Discipling men needs to move from an unusual activity in a few churches to a common characteristic in the life of most churches. And now the big idea is that the discipleship system of your church is perfectly designed to produce the kind of men you have sitting in the pews. You know, we're going to talk about a system perfectly designed. What about your church? In businesses, we have an axiom. Your system is perfectly designed to produce the results you are getting. Imagine a factory where the front right fender falls off every third car that rolls off the assembly line. Manufacturing systems of the factory is perfectly designed to produce cars that have 1 in 3 chance of a fender falling off. I wouldn't want a car that my fender fell off knowing that that's where that car come from. This applies to more manufacturing process. The same can be said of the ministry systems or models. In other words, the discipleship system of your church is perfectly designed to produce the kind of men you have sitting in the pews or not sitting in pews, as the case may be. That is why at Man in the Mirror, we are focusing on helping churches by equipping and training leaders, and that's why we wrote this book. We will present you with a system designed to sustain an effective disciple-making ministry to men in your church. This model has been proven at local churches. It's a system that works and designed to create passionate disciples. I'll try to show you this graph down here. I'm going to try to get close enough. As you can see down here at the bottom is the foundation, the conveyor belt, just like Henry Ford developed for his cars. And then it's talking about how you bring a man who needs Christ in. And it goes around, but right here on these little cogs, you've got the vision, which would be right here. Create at the top, you capture them, and you sustain. And part of your foundations is the portal priority, which we're going to be discussing later, the man code, and the 3 strands of leadership that builds our foundation. And when you do man, an all-inclusive ministry to man, and you notice it starts out small, the man's getting bigger and bigger, and finally, guess what you're getting? You got the bricks of disciples starting to build up. We're starting to get disciples made. This model demonstrates how to build a people mover or conveyor belt to disciple men within your church. Just like a moving sidewalk at an airport or an assembly line at Henry Ford's factory, this process helps men get from where they are to where God wants them to be. And that's a good thing. You know, we all got to move someplace, and this helps us to get to where God wants us to be, where we need to follow Him. The remainder of this chapter presents an overview of the components of the model as well as a preview of what is to come in the rest of the book. We will take a helicopter view and fly over the majority concepts and insights. Don't feel like you have to grasp it all now, because the following chapters unpack each step by step. Why are we presenting these items here? It is important to be familiar with all these ideas before discussion, each one detailed, because together they form an integrated whole. This system is most definitely more than the sum of its parts. The model in the book has 3 sections. The focus of part 1, the promise of men's ministry, is to better understand how men are doing, what do they need, and how to help them. We all need to know how to help each other. The focus of part 2 is the foundations of your ministry to men is understand the building blocks of the sustainable discipleship system in your church. The focus of part 3 is executing your men's ministry to give you strategy to disciple every man in your church. By the end of chapter 12, especially if you work through it with a team, you will create a concrete plan for exactly what to do in your church. Part 1 will be explored in chapters 2 through 4, part 2 in chapters 5 through 7, and parts 3 in chapters 8 through 12 of this book. I can never stress this book. This book is very helpful. And a little bit of an introduction in part 1, the promise of men's ministry, what your church can do for men. Before you start building a system, it is a good idea to understand both your starting and ending points. We begin with the men. Exactly what is it we are hoping to accomplish with them? The men you are trying to reach are the raw materials of your system. The men in your church and community are the inputs on the left side of the conveyor belt. You will read more about the state of man in America in chapter 2. Disciples. I like this word, disciples. I get excited. Your goal is to create an environment that God can use to produce disciples. In other words, we're going to be fruitful. Disciples are men who are called to walk with Christ, equipped to live like Christ and to work for Christ. We're going to take a brief stop here. We're going to go into 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 3 through 15. The book says 3 through 17, but Timothy only has 16 verses. So I'm going to read you 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 15 and 16. And it says, But if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and the ground of truth. And without the controversy is great, is the mysterious mystery of godliness. God was manifest in the flesh, justified in the spirit, seen in angels, preached unto the Gentiles, and believed in on the world, received up into glory. Very awesome, very awesome. See, this is talking about here the pillars and the foundation and building up. You know, just like we're here talking about building up, starting from small and working up, the same thing here. And so, you know, I mean, that verse there backs up what we're going to be talking about. We got a couple more verses in here. These outputs are products of your men's ministry system. Disciples are biblical Christians. Some will become leaders, and some of these leaders will become allies. And we're going to read more about this in chapter 3 of this book. What do men look like at each of these stages? Biblical Christians. What do men look like at biblical Christians? These men who grasp the gospel and are hungry to grow, they have stopped seeking the God they want and have begun to seek the God who is. They understand the change takes place from inside out. They know from their own experience that Christianity is not about behavior modification. It is about the heart of transformation. And in chapter 9, they're going to go into greater detail. We're going to talk about leaders. Leaders, these are men who are beginning to live out of the overflow of their own personal relationship with Jesus. No longer are they concerned only with their walk with God. Now they want to do what it takes to help others grow too. These are the trustworthy men who will in turn pass what they have learned on to others. Here we go, being fruitful. And and that also goes back into Matthew. And I think of the parable of the talents. When the master gave one of his servants 5 talents, the other 3, and the other 1. Look what the first 2 did. They took what they had, they took their hands, they were fruitful, they multiplied. Just think about what we're doing with other men. We are going to be fruitful. We are going to multiply. Just like it's in Genesis, God said in Genesis, be fruitful and multiply. We can never, ever go wrong by not using our hand and being fruitful and multiply, because God will equip us. That's why we do this together. We work as a team. We work within our churches as a team. We are going to rock this world. I done lost where I was at. Let me go. Leaders. These are the men that begin to live out their lives over their own personal relationship with Jesus. No longer are they concerned with their walk with God. I got interrupted. Now it's hard to get back to where I actually was. And okay, we're back here on two. I'm gonna go back. These are the trustworthy men who will in turn pass on what they have learned on to others. Now, as I got excited for a minute, and I'm sorry. We're gonna look at Timothy, 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. In case you want to go ahead and read that. Let me find it. I got it marked. But yeah, I got excited for a minute. I get excited when I get talking about being fruitful and multiply. I can't help that. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2 says, "And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach to others also." Disciple making. What they learn, they commit. They pass it on. They're fruitful. They multiply. They use their hands. I getting excited again. I got to slow down. Thirdly, we're going to talk about allies. Allies. These are the men who have become passionately convinced that God can use them and your church to transform the world for His glory. These are the men who become future members of your men's leadership team and fuel growth in your discipleship ministry with men. Pray and focus your energies on creating allies. And again, you're going to read more about this in chapter 4. Here we go, part 2 of the foundations of your ministry to men. 3 components provide a solid base which to build your men's ministry. The portal priority, your philosophy of ministry, a man code, the environment that you create for men, and 3 strands of leadership. The portal priority, churches that reach men effectively make disciples their portal priority. And they give us a scripture, Matthew chapter 28, verse 19. And we're going to read that one too, because I feel that this is just an important scripture too. Matthew 28, verse 19. I've already got it looked up, so if you ain't got there, I'm trying to truck on. And it says, "Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost." You see, that we are commanded to go forth and teach. We are to go forth and make disciples. However you look at it, teach, whatever, educate people on Christianity. By this we mean that all other initiatives of the church serve a purpose of the discipleship. You cannot produce worshipers by begging men to worship. You cannot produce tithers by guilting them to give. You cannot create evangelists simply by training men to share. Men will not worship a God they do not know and revere. They won't give to a God they don't love. They won't share about a God they aren't passionate about. Oh, ain't passionate about. Gotta love that before you do share about it. Jesus' model is to produce disciples who worship, disciples who tithe, and disciples who are passionate to share the good news about what He has done for them. We discussed the portal priority in chapter 5. Oh, we could talk about the man code. Churches that effectively disciple men have a strong masculine atmosphere. They create an unwritten man code that defines what it means to be a man in their church. New men soak it in from the atmosphere. To be a man here is to be an important and valuable and also play a part in what God is doing to transform the world. Sometimes the incredible adventure of following Christ is buried beneath the boring bulletin announcements. Make your church a place where men can be men, and you read more about the man code in chapter 5. So yeah, we're going to talk about this, how to make our church more acceptable to men. And we're going to briefly talk about the 3 strands of leadership. To disciple all men of your church and community, your conveyor belt would need to be a strong foundation leadership. Be a strong foundation leadership. Successful discipleship ministries for men who have the active involvement of the senior pastor, a committed leader, and an effective and renewed leadership team. 3 strands of leadership, like a cord of 3 strands in Ecclesiastes 4:12. And I didn't see this. I'm going to have to go look this up in a second. Let's go look this up right now. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 12. I missed that one. Sorry, folks. Let me see if I can find Ecclesiastes. Oh, we're going to the Old Testament. What did I say that was? Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 12. You're going to probably get ahead of me. Get to the page. And if one prevails against him, 2 shall stand with him, and the threefold cord is not quickly broken. So again, if one prevail against him, 2 shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. You know, it says here in my little concordance stand, this whole thing, that there is no state of perfection in the lives of those who live alone. And no one really loves God who does not love others as well as God. The best of life is a threefold code that cannot be broken. It consists of 2 people who help each other in love and who fellowship with God. I thought I'd read that because I thought, working together. Here we go. We're working together as a team. We're going to be fruitful because we cannot do this on our own. And that's the thing I'm getting into this book. I'm even really realizing there's a lot of things I've put up with. There's a lot of stuff I've kept in my struggles and not sharing and stuff. And, I'm probably going to be more of a sharer now that I've been reading, that I've read this. Okay. Above the foundation, the process. On top of the foundation, we will help you build a conveyor belt, the process of your men's ministry. They talk about wide to deep. Churches that reach men build a system that move men along the wide and deep continuum. A goal of your church's ministry with men is to take men who don't know Christ, interested in opportunities on the wide side, and move them along to become passionate disciples, invested in ministry on the deep side. Each activity or program in your church will appeal to men who are at different points in the continuum. One role of leadership is to make sure all of your leaders are on the same page and that you have an entire continuum covered to help disciple every man. All-inclusive process is develop an all-inclusive mindset by recognizing that everything in your church, everything in your church does that touches men and is men's ministry. In other words, the size of your men's ministry is equal to the size of the number of men in your church. The traditional definition of men's ministry is only those activities that happen when men are by themselves, such as Saturday morning breakfast. Here we go, food again. And I just lost my page. An all-inclusive ministry disciples men right where they are. Matter of fact, just basically right where they're at in their life. And all-inclusive gets them right there. God will speak to us when He needs us, when He needs to, and we're not going to be perfect, but there are times that God gets us right where we're having problems or where we're hurting and stuff. He'll send somebody or say something or have something come right to us and be like, oh, and then helps us from there and we get back on track and get going. Maximizing the kingdom impact of every interaction with every man. You have a men's ministry with every man in your church. The only question is it effective or is it ineffective? The wide and deep continuum and the old inclusive ministry are both detailed in chapter 7. Now, as we look by at at part 3 here, you remember that little cog that I was showing you on the model back there of the conveyor? Well, here it is again. To create, capture, sustain, and visions in the middle. You got to maintain focus on that vision that while you're creating. Maintain vision while you're capturing. If you're capturing, is your vision still being maintained? And are you still sustaining that vision? Is your men growing? Are you getting, is it working right? Do you need to go back and restart and revitalize? I mean, some things may work in one church, it's not going to work in another church, and that's why each church is going to be set to do different things as part of the ministry. So once the conveyor belt is built, you'll need an engine to start it in motion. You will build and execute your plans with the vision, create, capture, sustain strategy. Implementing this strategy helps you move men step by step along the continuum to become mature disciples. Here is a brief introduction to each element. They are described in detail in chapters 8 through 11, respectively. Vision. The church that produces disciples clearly defines and communicates their own vision in ways that resonates with men. Use a name, slogan, or a phrase that connects with men at a gut level. In every interaction you have with men, explain clearly, passionately, how this event or activity helps fulfill your purpose and brings glory to God. Create a momentum with men by creating a value. Get a man started in discipleship by helping him take a new step spiritually. Invite him to breakfast, to church, or to a special men's activity. If he says yes, it is because you have given him something he believes will be valuable. Capture momentum by giving every man a right next step. At the time you create momentum, use short-term, low-threshold activities that makes it easy for men to keep moving forward. For example, offer a 6-week topical study on a common felt need, such as money or work. Make sure you capture momentum by asking men for a commitment at the time they feel most valuable or most valuable. Sustain. Sustain momentum by engaging men in the most effective long-term discipleship processes of your church. As quickly as possible, help men enter into meaningful relationships with other men. Most lasting change takes place in the context of relationships. Sustain change by focusing on the heart rather than allowing men to simply be nice and perform. Repeat this cycle over and over through your interactions with men and see how God uses it to help men become passionate disciples. Building your plan. The system will work differently in every church. In chapter 12, we walk through the entire model again, step by step. We give you 2 sets of exercises, one to work through in the next 3 months and the other in the next year. This will give you a chance to build a concrete plan that fits your church. What's the result of implementing this system in the local church? You be a part of the dynamic church filled with passionate men who live and love like Christ. We have seen this in hundreds of churches across America. Why is this so important? Many leaders we talk to have expressed astonishment over the statistic from Barna Research that only 4% of Americans and 9% of born-again Christians hold a biblical worldview. Given the vast amount of money spent by the church each year, approximately $31 billion in 2001, churches representing 49.4 million, one is tempted to ask, what has the church been making? Because it sure doesn't seem like it has been making disciples. The consequences are staggering. A whopping 40% of the baby buster generation were raised by divorced and separated parents. Now, the sins of the fathers are being visited on the next generation. Tonight, as I'm speaking, or as this book was written, 33% of America's 72 million children will go to bed in a home without a biological father, and I'm supposed that's higher by now because this was back in 2001 according to this. And 66% of them are not expected to live with both biological parents through the age of 18. We are now bearing the full brunt of our failure to disciple men. The story we are told at the beginning of this chapter is not an illustration. It is a true account of one of the authors, Brent Clemmer. About the time his wife told him when it was easier when he was gone, Brett got a call from a friend. See how God works? You're going to hear about this. I just love this. From a friend called Kevin. You know how our wives are meeting in that women's Bible study? Well, I was talking to some of the other husbands. Maybe we should have a guys group too. If for no other reasons than to protect ourselves, because I'm pretty sure they're talking about us. Uh-oh, guilt trip kicking in. Brett was pretty sure, too. He wondered what if Kevin had heard about him. Sure, Brett said. What are we going to study? You remember that book they handed us out in church a few weeks ago? Just bring it and we'll see if we want to use that. You see, God works in mysterious ways when he needs to. Brett brought that book. The group, Brett says, was the beginning of a rebirth of his faith. Uh-oh, it's working. That book was called The Man in the Mirror, which is the next book I'm actually going to read. I've got the book. It's a little bit small paperback book than this book, but I'm going to read it to y'all because I know a lot of people haven't read it. And maybe we'll learn something together as we do it. And I'm going to do it online, and I'll probably do it the way I'm doing while I'm zooming the two, streaming to both pages at the same time. We decided to study, and it saved my marriage, my family, and in many ways my life. The book spoke directly to what I was going through. The whole concept of a cultural Christianity seemed like it was taken right from my experience. Brett adds, the most important part of their study was a half a dozen guys he met, all of us struggling to be good fathers, good husbands, and good work, and all working too hard, trying to find balance. It gave me brothers. And together we journeyed towards Christ. See, they came together as one, and they got on that right track, and they started journeying towards Christ. Brett's software company eventually went out of business, but a funny thing happened as my dream of building a company died. Brett said, as my career plummeted, my relationship with my wife and my kids soared. And I found a new relationship with my brothers and with God. Why? Because someone chose to disciple me. Uh-oh. Hear that? Someone chose to disciple. Someone decided to reach out and help. You have men in your church like Brett. This book has been written to help you reach them and disciple them for their good and the glory of God. Always for the glory of God. I get excited when I hear when we're going to do it for the glory of God. Amen. It's just exciting me. And thanks for joining the adventure. Together we can ask God to help us make sure that no man is left behind. You know, it just thinks me of that story. I think it's in Matthew, where Lazarus, I can't remember who it was. One went to heaven and the other dude went to hell. And they were trying to, it was too late for them to reach down and get him out and give him the water he needed because he was thirsty. We want to be like that. We don't want to leave nobody behind. We want to keep reaching, keep grabbing, and keep bringing people towards Christ. And they brought up some points here. It says men's ministry actually is a rocket scientist, but it's harder. Yeah, it is, because some of us can be stubborn. And it takes a long time to make a disciple. It don't happen overnight because we got a lot of struggles and a lot of places to go. And yes, it can take up to 10 years to build a successful men's ministry. There is no such thing as 5 easy steps to an effective men's ministry. Discipling men needs to go from a prototype stage to the manufacturing stage. Your system for building disciples is perfectly designed to produce men who are sitting in your pews or not. The No Man Left Behind model will help you move men step by step toward becoming mature disciples. That's true. A few little questions I'm going to ask you from here. Men's ministry is actually rocket scientist. Do you agree or not? And why? Well, it is and it ain't. Yeah, it is rocket scientist. We know what to do. We just got to get out and do it. We just got to start putting our effort forward. Start using these hands, these blessed hands that God gave us, and be fruitful. And and we got to learn, share our struggles with other men. They may have experienced it and can give us the wisdom that we need. We need to work together. Just because we're hard-headed and stuff has been like this. When you listen to Brett and how he almost was, it's like because he get wrapped up in his work. He got wrapped up doing it, even though he was going to church, he was teaching his kids, trying to do the right thing. He was leaving his wife, basically. He wasn't home half the time. He wasn't around his kids. All he did was going to church and back. He wasn't involved in the men's group. He wasn't having, a small relationship with a group of men where they could hold themselves accountable. We get that going. That's the easiest part. It is rocket scientist to a certain extent, but we got to design it to fit the men who are going to be sitting in our pews to what we want our church to look like. We're not going to be able to have every different type of ministry going in church, but we can have something that's interesting to the man in the church and interesting to the community. And as people come in, we can start developing other ministries. I think about Drew Oakley when he was up at Carrollton. And he told our district United Methodist men about how they started out with a few men, and then before you know it, they had over 90 to 100 people meeting. They had all these different groups, but they'd come together every once in a while and have a great big meeting all together. And it's just amazing. They even had the kids involved and everything. That was a great thing. Even when Bishop Davis was our bishop, and he came to Junction for our district United Methodist men, I remember the story he told about his son and the United Methodist men. Took his son under his wing and helped groom him. They discipled him, just like in this book. Out of the blue, his son was getting discipled. He was having a hard time with them, but that United Methodist men group took that little young man under his wings, and discipled him and made him into a fruitful disciple. And it just touches me. It touches my heart. The next question is, in a few sentences, how would you describe the system for reaching and discipling men in your church today? Well, like in my church, we really don't have any because there's only 3 or 4 of us, and it's kind of hard to do when they're older and their health is failing and stuff, and I'm the only one, and so I'm trying to build this up on my own, and it's going to be kind of hard, but I'm going to do it one way or the other. I mean, we have tried this in the past when Chad Brent was there. It worked for a while, but we went, and everybody got tired of doing that same thing over and over. I mean, us few, we'd get together, we'd eat breakfast, we'd do a Bible study, talk, tell stories or whatever you want to call it, and then that would be it. We never really did anything else. So, I mean, we should be doing other activities besides coming together every week to eat and pray. I mean, yeah, that's important. We need to have prayer. We need to get together and do that. But we also need to be doing stuff, helping other people. I'd say if we got out and did help other people, shared our skills and our talents, I think we would have done a lot better. That's my personal opinion, but, And then when we look back at this No Man Left Behind model that I showed you earlier, which concepts are you looking forward to learning about and why? Me, I want to learn all about them because there's not just one in particular I'm interested in. I think if I look at them all, I might be able to work them all in and to kind of do them all together. But I think, some churches may only have to do 1 or 2, but if I get my church going the way I want it to go and grow, and I know it's going to take time, I want to be able to have all of them going so people have that variety they can get in there, and they can choose where they want to be. What's best for them. It's like I'll say about Junction City Baptist and Pastor Cho Sargent. Even Cho himself was going the wrong way, and he was on deathbed, he was on drugs, he almost died, and then he had that big change. And now you look at him now, you would have never known that he was that bad off. Someone reached out to him, converted him, and look at him. He's a professor over at Campbellsville Unity. His church went from 1 service to 3 different services. That church has grown. They got more people there than I've seen. And I'm so excited when I pass by that church. I'm so glad I got to know him. But anyway, that's all I'm going to do for chapter 1 for now. I think next week I will be live again, and we're going to do chapter 2. I'm going to try to do a chapter a week, try to keep up. And if I skip a week, I'm sorry, I'm busy and stuff, but if I can, my goal is to at least do a chapter a week. Sometimes I might do 2 chapters a week. I might come live and do 2 different chapters, but I'm going to break up the session so you can go back and read each chapter. Like this week was the first chapter of the book. And if you need this book, you can go to nomanleftbehind.org or look up maninthemirror.org, and you can find this book online. And I think it's like $20 or $15. It don't take long to get here. And wait a minute, I might have the other thing I wanted to show you. Yeah, I do. I got it here. The Foundations course, which we're working on now. There's the books for it. They look similar to this, which this is the second session's methods and tactics. This is when this, from what I've read, gets into designing your men's group, designing how you want it and stuff. The first one is just about getting it all together too is putting the tactics and methods together. I mean, you can buy, like I did, the DVD format, and this where you can use it for yourself, and then you can take it and use it inside the church and stuff. You don't have to go on the internet and stuff and do it. Or you can get online and buy the online version, but it's only good for 1 year. It's $99, but you do it online, you get these books here in PDF and all the videos online, so you can go online and do an online session with your men and do it that way, or do like I did. I've gotten both. So this way, because at first I was like, well, this would be okay, but then I was trying to show this video through Zoom, but there's problems with Zoom accepting stuff, and sometimes the internet's slow, then it messes up on my end, your end. So I decided that I put these down on my YouTube page, so I can go back even after a year. I can sit there and use the video, and then everybody comes into the internet, and it's much better, much smoother. At first it's a little rough, but you know, we'll get through it. It eventually works out. And we just got to bear with it, because you know the devil's going to throw objects at our way and stuff, and so. But anyway, I hope you all have a good time, and I hope you enjoyed reading this, and I'll talk to you later.